Hello, welcome to episode 32 of live.withcode.uk. Last week we talked about string formatting and we're going to build on that this week, but also add in a bit more about 2D lists, so lists of lists. It is also World Maths Day on the 3rd of March, so we're going to build that in to make a times table quiz with two different types of questions. Some where you get given two random numbers and you have to say what they are, what the product is when you multiply them together. And it will line up your questions beautifully with string formatting and give you a little bit of ASCII art for a tick or a cross. And the other type of question is where instead of saying what is the product, you have to work out which two numbers multiply together to get that product. So 3 times 1. Let's get one wrong. 2 times 2 is not 0. You just get a cross instead of a tick. And all of the scores are lined up beautifully. All of the question numbers are lined up beautifully using string formatting. So that's where we're headed. Let's get started from an empty program. It's live coding, so you'll see all the mistakes, but most importantly, the thought processes behind the code. So first choice is let's think about how we're going to store our data. I would like to have multiple questions, and I'll store all the values for those questions in a list. Let's say that we want a question that says, what is 5 times 4? And we know that the answer is 20. I'm going to store all of those values in a list. But I'd like to be able to store multiple questions. So I'm going to have multiple lists. Let's say 3 times 7 is 21. So multiple lists inside a list. Each value in a list separated by a comma. Each list in our list also separated by a comma. So that's a two-dimensional list because we've now got rows and columns. We're building it up like a grid of data. Okay, so if we print that, we'll see all of the values. Or if we put some indexing expressions in, that 0 means we're looking at the first row. And we can also use another indexing expression to go for that 4. So the 0 means the first row, and the 1 here means not 0 but 1, the second value in here. Okay, what we'll do now is select a question from our 2D array, sorry, our 2D list. So let's start with the first one and just print that. So we've got our first lump of data. What I'd like to do is have something that will ask a question and we can pass some data into it. We can send all of that data in and it will display it beautifully and work out whether or not we get the right answer. In order to do that, we need to define how to ask a question. So we use def ask question. It needs to know what data to work with, so it needs to know a question. And at that point, you can display the question instead. Okay, so we've displayed the data. Now we're going to make the data look a bit more useful for us. So we're going to say, what is 5 times 4? And make the user type in 20. So instead of print, we'll say help input. I've got insert mode on. We'll use string formatting to say, okay, we want to say 5 times 4 equals, and then some space for the user to type in, and a question mark so they know it's a question. Something like that, and then we'll go .format. So the first number we want to display will be question, oops, can't spell, question square brackets 0 because we want the first number. And then the second parameter that will pass from string format into this expression here is going to be this value, so that's index 1, question 1. Okay, let's see if it works. So 5 times 4 equals something. We need to type in the answer and then find out if we've got it right or not. So when you ask a question, it's rude not to listen to the answer. We'll store the answer in a variable. And then you can see if we're correct or not. So I'm going to return a Boolean expression, which is what you'd put in an if statement. So is the answer equal to the third value in our list? And our list is called question. So question, can't spell, question square brackets 2 for the third value. And then we can print that return value. 5 times 4 is 20, but when I press enter, it says I've got it wrong. That's because input is a built-in function that returns a string, and we're comparing the integer version with the string version, and they're different. So we'll first have to convert this integer version into a string. We could do it the other way around, but that would introduce errors later on. So 5 times 4 is 20. Good, now it thinks we've got it right. But before we move on, I would like to use a bit more string formatting to make sure all of our questions line up beautifully. So we'll pad them out. We'll say this is going to be 3 characters long. This is going to be 3 characters long because that's 3 characters long. And I'd also like to say what question number it is. So question something, which is going to be 3 characters long. Then we'll ask the question. So we need to know what question number it is. Question number. What question number is it? Well, we'll need to have another parameter coming in that tells us which question number it is, which means we need to pass it in here. So I'll just say that's question number 1. That's better. Question number 1, 5 times 4 equals something. Great. So now what we can do is iterate through every question in our list. So here we go. For I in range whatever is the length of our 2D array, and the length is 2 because we've got 2 lists in our 2D array. And then we're using I to count from 0 up to just less than 2. So rather than always looking at the first one, we'll look at position I. We can pass I in here, which will almost work, but we're saying question 0. I don't want to do that. Let's go for question 1 instead. So that's 20. Next question. Pull the data in from here. 3 times 7 is 21. Great. Now we'll add some ticks and crosses in the right sort of position. So let's see. If that return value is true, then, well, first of all, we could have a score, couldn't we? So score equals 0. But if we get it right, as in we return true from ask question, score can increment, as in increase by 1. We can display a tick. Now I'm going to go for a tick as a capital V and a /, something like that. So we'll print it. We'll use string formatting. String.format, let's have a /. And just so that we can right align it by, I don't know, like 25 characters or something. And also put the score. So the score is going to be the second parameter passed into string.format, which is just score. Let's see if that works. Let's get it right. 20. Almost right, but we've got 2 / on top of each other. Let's change this one to a capital V. That'll be better, but not quite right. I want the V just to be 1 space to the left. That's better. It looks like a tick. If we get it wrong, nothing happens yet. So let's have an else. This should be better. Let's copy that, plop it down here, but instead of a / we'll have a capital X. Let's get it wrong. 6. We've got an X. Good. Score is 0. 3 times 7 is 21. We've got a tick. Great. It looks like it's working. The only thing we'll add in is we'll have 2 different question styles. So question type. And let's have a default value for this. So we'll assume that the question type is 0 to begin with. So we should probably start commenting this. I'm just going to copy and paste this, otherwise the video is going to be too long. So let's put some Google approved docstring format. So we're describing what ask question does. We've got 3 parameters, a question number, which is an integer. That's this one. We've got a list containing 3 values, 2 numbers you multiply together and a product. And we've got either a 0 or a 1, depending on what type of question we want to ask. So here we go. If that question type is equal to 0, we do what we've already done. Otherwise, we do something very similar, but with a different style of question. So this time, 1, 2, 3, we'll leave that blank and instead display the product, the answer, which needs to be padded to 3 spaces. Okay, so This first parameter to string.format is still going to be the question number. This second one now needs to be the middle value in our list up here instead of the first one, and this one needs to be the product, the last number. So how can we test this? Let's put in question type 1. That's better. Something times 4 is 20. 5 times 4 is 20. I've got something wrong here, because the logic is still thinking that the answer should be, the third value in our list. It should be the first value, so index 0. Let's try again. It's better. Last thing that we'll do is alternate between question type 0 and question type 1 using I. Remember, I is what we use to count through all of our questions. So if we say I mod 2, mod means you divide by and keep the remainder. So that's going to be 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, because that's what the remainder will be. Let's try it. First we have a traditional question, 5 times 4 is 20. Then we've got something times 7 is 21. Good, it's alternating between the two types. That's great. Okay, nearly there, but instead of always having the same data, it would be nice if we could generate it by random. So import random. Let's have a constant to say how many questions we want. Let's start with 5, and then for I in range however many questions we've got, and actually we can reuse that down here because the length of values is going to be however many questions we've got, as long as you spell it right. There we go. So for I in range questions, we want to generate 2 random numbers, work out what they are when you multiply them together, and then add them into this list. So let's say n1 equals random.randint, something between 1 and 12. Do that again, but with a different variable, and then work out the product, which is going to be the first number we chose by random multiplied by the second number. Then we need to plop them into a list, n1, n2, and product, and add that list, that one-dimensional list, into this list so that we get a 2-dimensional list. Values.append, plop that in, and I hope that we've now got randomly generated data for our test. 1 times 6 is 6. Great, let's get this one wrong. Something times 1, let's put in a text value. It doesn't crash, we just get it wrong. 110, get these ones wrong, and the score works. The only thing I'm probably going to do is line these up so that it's in the middle. So here we go, just before the width specifier, I'll put this in that says it's going to be center aligned. Let's try again. That's better, it just looks a bit neater to me. So that's 16, something times 4 is 12. Great, you get the idea. I'm going to put some challenges down at the bottom. I'll copy and paste them in because this video is quite long. Here we go. Challenge number 1, we want more questions. Dead easy, just change this constant to 10 instead of 5. Next, let's have a random list, a list of strings that says, I don't know, it's maths time or get ready for a maths quiz, and then it chooses one of those random messages and displays it before the quiz goes. And then finally, a bit more thought behind it for World Maths Day. You've got a score, you know how many questions there are. From that, you can work out a percentage, round it to 2 decimal places, and again, you can do that with string formatting. You might need to Google how to do it or watch last week's video so that you can get an overall percentage. Remember, you can get links to interactive free remote learning resources in the links, all the links are in the description of this video or on live.withcode.uk, or if your school's signed up for the free weekly competitions, then you can join in on compete.withcode.uk. Thanks very much, all the very best, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.